Welcome everyone. This is the panel on with Bitcoin exchanges adapt or die, how OG exchanges thrive. The panelists are Obi Nwosu. Obi, did I pronounce your name right?
You actually got it really well. Yeah, you did it really well.
Perfect. Obi from Coinfloor and Nejc Kodrič from Bitstamp. Welcome guys. How are you doing?
Very good.
Paulo from Bitfinex was originally going to be on this panel. He didn't make it, so it's just the three of us. What we're going to discuss is how do you guys stay relevant with your business. I think both of you, Bitstamp and Coinfloor, are among the oldest Bitcoin exchanges around. Next, let's start with you, because Bitstamp is literally the oldest Bitcoin exchange still running, right? What's the story of Bitstamp? How did you guys start? When did you guys start?
Yeah, we're 3 halvings old. So that's quite something in the space, right? So we've been through, this is our 3rd time. So yeah, we started in 2011. At the time, crypto was way different. So, I mean, there was no crypto, it was just Bitcoin. The industry was Bitcoin enthusiasts, maximalists. There was no ETH, there was nothing really. Also, there was much less divide. All of a sudden, you know, we have all these scaling solutions and opinions, people being super passionate about their opinions. Back then, it was kind of this small, wacky group, one forum where we discussed things, and that was it. Communications ran through IRC, everyone knew everyone. So yeah, times have changed.
There was also only one exchange, basically. Back then, there was Mt. Gox.
We were the 7th to exist.
Yeah.
There were Mt. Gox, there were Trade Hill, there were a few others. We were the 7th.
Volume-wise, it was just Mt. Gox, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So technically, you were the 7th exchange.
Yeah.
And this, okay, Obi, what about Coinfloor?
So yeah, I mean, we're not as old as Bitstamp, but around 2011 was when I actually first started looking at Bitcoin, and so I was aware of Bitstamp at the time, and I started looking at it when it was around 100, and then it went down to like a few dollars, and I thought this is a lot of rubbish, and forgot about it until 2 years later. My co-founder brought my attention back because I was running my own company at that time, and at that time it was in the hundreds of dollars, and I realized something important was happening here. And as a background, I was a CTO for 15 years, so I was initially attracted by the technology. So we saw in the UK there weren't really any significant players, and we decided to launch in 2013. So it was just after a little bit. It was about it was about 6 or 7 months after we incorporated the company, the first halving. And then published the actual algorithmic exchange launched in early 2014, and so it was still only about Bitcoin then. And you know, a few years later, a few people would come to conferences talking about decentralized exchanges or stable coins, and it was just, again, you'd just be laughed at because all the volume was just Bitcoin, fiat to crypto. And I think eventually, to cut a long story short, we're going to go back to basically that being the story. We're just going through a growing pain right now.
Yeah, and Coinfloor is based in the UK. Is it also mostly focused on the UK, or are you also serving customers from other countries?
So we are based in the UK. We were, from the beginning, we focused on sophisticated and professional investors and traders. We just didn't feel it was appropriate to offer, as you know, a school project like cryptocurrency to retail. But now, but we did have customers who are from other countries as well. International, especially sophisticated, tend to be international. And more recently, we've now started in retail. So we're still focused on UK, but we are looking at the obvious next step will be Europe as well. Now that we feel that Bitcoin, not anything else, but Bitcoin is mature enough to reasonably offer to retail users.
Right. Nejc, you are from Slovenia, I think, and Bitstamp is also, well, started in Slovenia, but it has been moving around over the years a little bit, I think. Well, why is this? I guess one of the topics is adapt or die. Has this got something to do with that?
This absolutely has to do with that. You know, the primary reason why it started in Slovenia because I'm, you know, Slovenian national. So the co-founder and myself, we launched out of Slovenia, but then as business was taking off, you know, in 2012, as business was taking off, we figured out what we're doing, is it actually permitted? Because no one would give us straight answers. So we wrote a letter to FCA, at the time was still FSA, whether, you know, asking if the UK was a jurisdiction where we could operate. And we chose UK because, you know, we both speak English and, you know, there's direct flights from EasyJet. You know, at the time we didn't have we didn't have a means, you know, it was early beginning. So we thought, okay, London's cool. So FCA at the time gave us kind of the opinion they don't recognize crypto as a currency, therefore we are not, you know, financial institution, so we can do what we do. So we thought, okay, let's go. So we started transition.
So lack of regulatory clarity was the reason to leave Slovenia. Yeah. Okay. Go on.
And you know, keep in mind, 2012, not a lot of people actually knew about crypto. So in that sense, we were maybe ahead of a time a little bit. So we started our move to the UK, and then in 2013, towards the end of 2013, Luxembourg came out with some sort of announcements about putting together a framework for, you know, crypto regulation. So in 2014, the beginning of 2014, I actually traveled there to met with, you know, the Ministry of Finance, the CSSF, the regulator, a couple banks. And yeah, I thought this is the place for it because everyone knew what Bitcoin is. Because I was used to kind of explain that Bitcoin is not a company, there's no Bitcoin building, and I would have to explain what mining was. So it was a different feeling when someone kind of knew all of it. So that's when we thought, okay, Luxembourg is it, and we immediately started our licensing efforts in Luxembourg and migrated to Luxembourg. So yeah, now we are a global firm, but we have a license for Europe out of Luxembourg. We have management out of Luxembourg. We still have quite a lot of operations in Slovenia. Most of the development, customer care, and those kind of departments are based in Slovenia. And then we have some staff in the US as part of our global expansion.
Right. So over these years that both of you have been operational with your exchanges, what have you found were the biggest challenges in running a Bitcoin exchange? Obi, do you want to go first?
So, I mean, a lot of the things you just said echoed for us. I think if I would break down the two challenges, they're in two camps. One is education, and basically the last 6+ years have been education, and it'll probably be the next 6+ years as well.
Education of who?
Education of everyone, from initially from our investors, and that's still ongoing, and that will continue. But of our employees.
This is This is education of what Bitcoin itself is.
What I mean, well, now they're more sophisticated, but at the beginning it was what Bitcoin is. But of our customers, on our team, of regulators. So that's one big ongoing challenge. It gets easier and easier the more people get involved, but that was a massive problem and challenge for all of our history and talking to banks, whoever it may be. And the other area which is highly related was regulation, and what that meant, the lack of regulation, because we had the same talks with the FCA and FSA at the time, was that we would have, especially early on, there were lots of challenges around banking. I think almost every exchange that's been around for that long realizes that. We talked to literally hundreds of banks over the last 6 years. Now it's a lot easier, literally only for the last 2 or 3 years. But if you went back 3 or 4 years ago, it was still incredibly hard. And part of the reason it's easier is because we've been around for a long time as well. It's this virtuous circle. But those were the two biggest challenges: banking and regulation, and education. And I think the education one will still be with us for a good few more years to come. As new people enter the market, the whole process starts again.
Right. And do you know why regulation and banking is such a problem? I'm assuming it probably has to do with money laundering concerns.
So yeah, the top of the line reason is that's publicly stated is always going to be in the short term money laundering and terrorist financing. There's another concern as well, which is not so obvious, I think, until you become maybe a more established exchange or dealing with larger volumes, which is fraud. And so because fraud doesn't come in money laundering or terrorist financing, but no one likes to see an 80-year-old vulnerable person lose their life savings because and the problem is the same things that deal with anti-money laundering and terrorist financing also deal with fraud. And even if you don't care about we do, but if they're an exchange that doesn't care about putting in those other processes, you still don't want to see vulnerable people losing their money. And that even if you go through and discuss and explain, that they're being scammed. It's you have to have control. You have to understand who your customer is to work out, if they don't even understand what 2FA is and they don't know how to use the system, are they really operating their account? So that is another area that is a concern. And banks, are also concerned about that. They don't want to have on their consciousness that happening. So that's a third, I would put it at equal level to terrorist financing and money laundering.
So how do you actually deal with that problem? You talk with your customers, ask them why they're buying Bitcoin, or how?
You have to get to know your customer. And what we try to do is balance, but you also understand people's desire and need and rights to have control over their money and have that perception of control. So this is one of the biggest challenges of any financial institution, is balancing the right to have people to access to their money when they want access to it, because it's their money and you're effectively their servant. They're giving the honor of their service, but on the other hand, protecting them from a number of different things, and the biggest is potential risks around fraud, and so it leads to this conflict. And that's the biggest challenge. That's why there's the regulators and banks look for exchanges which they feel have the maturity to balance those things off. Because if you just focus on one, you're going to end up with a lot of people, swindled users on your site. If you focus on the other, you'll end up with a non-commercial site that doesn't make money, which is no good either, because you're out of business. And then the only ones left are the exchanges that don't care about those customers. And so everybody wants these people who strike that balance. Yeah.
Nejc, banking, regulation, fraud, are these the same for Bitstamp, or are there other challenges you would like to add?
Largely the same, but I would add one more. Just looking through the whole timeline of Bitstamp, I would say it was, hacks, banks, and scams. First of all, if we scroll back 7-8 years ago, we were all small, companies, all immature companies with, some resources, but custodying a larger amount of money. There was no two-factor authentication, custody solutions is now. So we all know Mt. Gox, what happened, and those kind of things happen all the time. New week, new hack. So that did put a kind of a stain on the industry. But I think it was just the industry was immature. Plus, the companies didn't have resources to really invest in security. Therefore, the cost of a successful hack was much lower. As the industry matured, as us as companies earned more money, we had more money to invest in IT security. So that problem kind of went away relatively quick. But then the issues with the banks came in. So here's where Obi addressed it a little bit. So banks, there was a period where banks were super skeptical to work with crypto exchanges. We now have a network of around 20 banks that we work with. It's much easier. If we only had like tier 3 banks, now we have tier tier 2 and also tier 1 banks that we work with. So it's much easier from that sense. And that's very positive because it allows us to scale to have a solid banking counterparty. Because a couple of years ago we were kind of the companies in the space were growing fast, and we had to resort to like tier 3 banks, which are not as stable as you wanted. But again, this is how this industry is maturing. And now the last item is scams. Also briefly, Obi touched it. This is a big industry and there's a lot of money involved. And there are people who are crafty enough to scam those who are, naive or just, deceived. And this is an ongoing battle that we fight day to day to make sure that, our customers are, the ones that actually want to do business with it, they're not deceived. So it's kind of a growing pain.
Yeah, there's also a lot of technical innovation because you mentioned hacks, and there's also sort of ideas to maybe limit that, like faults, provable reserves. People have been talking about these kinds of things for years now. Do you see any demand from customers for these kinds of solutions? Let's start with Nejc this time.
From our end, we are regulated. Therefore, we have external, internal audits. We have all sorts of reviews. We have inspections by the regulators. So I know some customers prefer to have this technical proof of reserves, but on the other hand, we do have regulators that we answer to, and they hold us accountable. So that is kind of proof of itself, and it's periodically checked. Every year that we have to produce our financial statements, and that's being audited. And for all of the serious players in the space, that's kind of the standard. That's the new kind of baseline. Those who do not achieve those standards are, in my eyes, considered risky.
Right. So old-fashioned auditing.
So
it works.
What about Coinfloor?
I guess this is an area where we probably are known to be very different from pretty much every other player in the space and that's so way back at the Mt. Gox, when Mt. Gox happened, I think a number of exchanges had a joint statement that came out saying, we will perform proof of reserves audits going forward. Because it was put forward as an idea. I think it was Greg Maxwell actually suggested it as an approach, but many people suggested similar approaches at the time as a way to prove in a crypto way, in a Bitcoin way, that we were solvent. Because effectively, what's really interesting about proof of custody, it's not perfect, but it actually instills a mindset that's similar and runs with the ethos of crypto, i.e. don't trust, verify. Because in order to use it, you're educating your customers in the mindset of not just trusting a third party. In fact, regulators and auditors audited the banks that were weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing, and led to the original crash out of which Bitcoin came about. So although that process, there's nothing wrong with that, and it's a good idea to do that. What is not good is to have people have the mindset that they should just trust a third-party auditor, because we know that didn't work it leads to various moral hazard and risk. And it's also an orthogonal thing. You can do both. You can have this public audit where customers can self-verify to some extent and do it. It's not an argument to not do the other. So a number of people came out with that, included Coinbase, Kraken, blockchain.info at the time, BTC China, who are no longer around, I believe, at the time, but they were big at the time. And I think also Bitstamp. And I don't think anyone other than Kraken, I think, did one proof of solvency audit. We, the following month, said we would do this. And we did our first the following month in, I think, April 2014. And in every month since. And in fact, last month was our 73rd. So we've done 6 years worth of it. So we're not the biggest exchange in the world, but we're an okay size. But if we can do it for 6 years, then there's no reason why no one else can do it. Now, the question is, why would you not do it? If you have resources that are 10 times larger than ours, the argument would be, why would you not allow your customers to have some mechanism to self-audit when they store crypto on you? And obviously, eventually, not your keys, not your coin, they should store crypto themselves. But while they're storing it and while you have the honor of their service on your exchange, why not give them every mechanism you have for them to self-audit? The only reasons would be, it cannot be resources. So, because we've proven it cannot be resources. So it's either you're not solvent, or you're hacked, or you're using the crypto on other exchanges. So you're behaving like a traditional bank, but not licensed like a bank. And so it's effectively fractional reserve banking. Or you're not comfortable with the level of transparency it will give. I think that's probably the likely thing, but you're not comfortable with the level of transparency it would give to your customers and the rest of the world. Because we give radical transparency. People see how many customers are balanced with us. People see what balances we hold. And generally, the perception of the amount of balances that a company's holding and the reality are very different things. And it's often not of business value it's not of business benefits to give that level of radical transparency. But this is a new economy. And in this economy, if you are custodying someone else's crypto, you need to give radical transparency because it's all about self-custody. So you have to compensate by radical transparency. Anyway, that's a quite strong view on our side.
Yeah, I didn't intend this to become a debate, but this is actually kind of interesting thing. Nejc, Obi says there's no reason not to offer provable reserves. What do you say?
Look, I completely agree. You know, it's a good thing, but so little people actually are capable of reviewing that. I mean, I'm still a proponent, you know, do your own custody, be your own bank. I'm all about financial sovereignty. So if you have that mindset, then, you know, have your hardware wallet and just keep it to yourself. I mean, we already have to do this proof of reserves for auditors. I mean, to implement some sort of technical solution, yeah, there's probably a group of people that will be super satisfied with it. There are some restraints. I mean, when we do kind of the human capital allocation, you know, this is what I'm trying to say. This is a service that a very small minority of people would actually appreciate. And, you know, we have a finite amount of resources that we have to allocate, and this simply just didn't come up to the priority. We do it anyways to the auditors. I get the point. Technology allows it. It's just, you know, there are only, you know, so many things you can do.
Well, I mean, my only final point is I think are about 1/10 of the size of you as a company, and we can do it. And what we find is our customers, when you explain that, it allows you to learn the mindset of don't trust, verify.
I mean, you're just proving the asset. You're not proving the liability. You have to open your books to also show the liability. I mean, our cold storage address is public. You can go on.
Completely agree. It's not perfect. It's not perfect, but it's not perfect. But it's still better than. But I don't think the argument that unless it's perfect, I do nothing, is not a strong argument. And the alternative is, and also you wrote a joint statement after Mt. Gox promised to do it every month. You didn't even do it once. I mean, these are things that build trust. And also, if you're sending transactions in and out of the blockchains, to try and cheat the system is a very hard thing to do, because people will be able to analyze the blockchain that just before the audit, money flows in and money flows out over a period of multiple years. It becomes something that will leave a fingerprint on the blockchain, which will also be able to analyze. And again, just like Bitcoin, most people don't run those. Eventually, most people should, but it's like levels of education. First, own Bitcoin, then learn to start to get into the mindset of don't trust, verify, then learn to have your self-custody and get a hardware wallet, and eventually have your own node. That's the sort of education path. But the same thing we see happens with our customers. Over 6 years, initially it was a few people, but we perfected our instructions, made them simpler and simpler, And there are more online tools where people can click through the instructions. And we find that a greater and greater percentage of people do it over time. So it is possible. And this is not about Coinfloor. I really think that for crypto to get to the next stage, we need to educate people in the mindset of don't trust, verify. And even as an exchange, provide tools to allow people to, at least to some extent, verify themselves. Anyway.
I would advocate a different approach. People do their self-custody, implement Lightning, and then fund your account when you want to and when you need to. You know, on the other side, I think we'll see
completely agree.
Growing population of stable coins. Sorry, Aaron, we cannot hear you.
Yeah, the mic's off.
Can you hear him?
No, I can't. But finish your point. I can't hear him though.
Yeah. What I'm saying is, I mean, I'm a bigger advocate of doing your own custody, be sovereign, you know, have your Bitcoins on your hardware wallet. I think you can never have 100% certainty if you have a Bitcoins at exchange. Even if we do proof of reserves, look, we only prove the assets that we hold. We don't prove the liabilities, right?
Correct. Yep, that's correct. All correct.
So you always need an oracle that checks what is the actual liability. So as soon as you get to that step, look, I mean, in our case, we have auditors, we have regulators. They hold us accountable. We actually would go to jail if we would be insolvent and would cover it up. I mean, we have responsibilities.
I just think, as background of the exchanges in space, Bitstamp is one of the exchanges I respect highest. I think you've been around for a long time. You have great people in the team. I have a lot of respect for Bitstamp. I think as a general state, we've now come into the retail space, and as we've come into the space and we have revenue from our institutional customer and sophisticated customer base, we have the freedom to sort of speak our mind in terms of how we think retail should be done. And we'll be doing that over the coming months and years. So we think...
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Okay, so we think that it's really important to, if you can do something, you should do it. Definitely don't trust, verify, self-custody, not your keys, not your coins, completely agree. However, if someone is storing crypto on our exchange, even for 5 minutes, we should provide them tools to be able to self-verify to the best extent that allowed by technology. That's one. Two, we should not be offering anything other than Bitcoin to retail. To sophisticated users, fine, but to retail, we know, every OG knows that really it's laughable to compare anything to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is just about good enough to offer to retail, just about. Anything else is a million miles away. So we only offer retail. And also, we deal with sophisticated investors and traders. We know for 6 years, these people also trade in traditional markets, and many of them lose money trading. So to offer a trading offering to retail is also disingenuous. If the best and the most professional find a challenge to make money, you should offer them a regular saving product like dollar cost averaging, only Bitcoin, and provide them proof of custody. Those are the three, and that's what we'll. And I don't see any strong argument to say no to any of those points.
Obi, Nejc, I had some difficulties currently, but thanks for keeping the discussion going. Let's move to the last point because we don't have a lot more time left. I want to ask about Lightning. Are you guys working on implementing Lightning? When Lightning?
Yes. I'm personally a big proponent. We have many employees in the firm that are super enthusiastic. Cannot tell you when, but there is a group of people in the firm that is super passionate about Lightning, and it's pretty much all they talk about. So, yeah, we are super bullish on Lightning.
But we want to hear a ETA, Nejc.
Yeah, I know everyone wants to hear an ETA, and this is the part where I cannot say because, look, just keep your eyes and ears open, and you'll hear and see the announcement.
All right, Obi, any plans?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of Lightning, but that is coming probably further down the line. So we have no ETA on Lightning right now.
What about something like Liquid? Is either of your exchanges thinking of integrating Liquid?
Liquid is something that we are in. I mean, again, I love the stuff that Blockstream do, and we are talking to the Blockstream guys. So there'll probably be more information on that down the line.
All right, Nejc?
But it would be great to have other people like Bitstamp on that in terms of flows between counterparties.
I love guys from Blockstream and what they're doing. Currently, we're not at the stage to implement Liquid yet, but we follow their development.
All right, last question then. I think, Obi, you already mentioned this. Coinfloor doesn't offer any altcoins, is that correct?
Absolutely none, no. We announced last year, December, that we were going Bitcoin only. We listed Ethereum for about 11 months, and that was 11 months, and it was long enough.
Why did you stop listing Ethereum?
Because the developers of Ethereum basically stated that Ethereum 1 wasn't good enough, and they were coming out with Ethereum 2. And at that point, we have 4 things we check for. Is this currency, does it actually aim to be a value currency? Is it technically mature enough? Is the community strong enough? And is there regulatory clarity around it? Ethereum was almost there, but when the developers themselves say it's not technically strong enough, then it's not technically strong enough. I can't objectively state that it's technically strong enough when they're stating it's not. And so we had to delist it.
Right, so Bitcoin only. What about Bitstamp? Offers some altcoins, I think, right, Nejc?
Yeah, I mean, we are super conservative, not as conservative as
when are you going to list Ethereum? Or are you even listing Ethereum?
Yeah, we have five cryptocurrencies. Right now, we're adding some towards the end of this month. We announced a short list of a few cryptos. We are on the more conservative side when it comes to listing. We focus more on stability, robustness, rather than being first to list a new coin. So that's our kind of thesis.
So which coins do you list right now?
Currently, we have Bitcoin, we have XRP, Ethereum, and Bitcoin Cash.
That's
Did I miss
4,
anyone?
right?
Yeah,
Litecoin?
no, I missed Litecoin. Sorry, I apologize. Yeah.
Right. Is this an important part of the business? Is there a lot of volume on these coins, or is it mostly Bitcoin?
I mean, I think more cryptos you add, you have a kind of a long tail. Most of the liquidity concentrates in the top 1, top 2, maybe top 3 cryptos. I think what it gives customers reason to stay and not move elsewhere where there's more cryptos available. But I think majority of the trading is done in the top 3, top 5 cryptos.
Right.
The others are just reasons to pick your platform that has a more kind of larger variety.
Got it. All right, guys, I think that's our time. Thanks for being on. Thanks for the interesting discussion. Happy Halving. Any last words?
Nejc?
To the moon.
Super excited for the next, 3.6 years seems to be the average halving period.
Yeah, I think timing is just perfect with quantitative easing and halving happening kind of in the same year. So you couldn't wish for a better setup.
It's like the perfect storm, right?
Happy new Bitcoin, happy new Bitcoin year. Or leap year.
Thanks a lot, guys. Cheers.
Thanks, guys. Great to meet you.